Herkese merhabalar. BPS Assessment ile online bilgi ortak oturumuna hoş geldiniz. Online katılımcılarımızdan öncelikle özür dilerim gecikme yaşadığımız için. Oturum boyunca sesiniz ve videonuz kapalı olacaktır. Eğer sorunuz olursa lütfen chatbox'tan yazmaktan çekinmeyin. Bugün sizlerle birlikte reçete yazma becerisinin önemi ve geliştirilmesini hedefleyen BPS Assessment'ın PSA sınav sistemi ile ilgili konuşacağız. Ben Can Haseki, ekip arkadaşlarım Erman Karabulut ve Müge Miray Atalp, sunum sonrasında sorularınızı cevaplamak için burada olacağız. Online bilgi olarak bilgi sektöründe birçok işbirliğimiz var. İngiliz Farmakoloji Derneği'nin geliştirmiş olduğu PSA sınav sistemi de bunlardan birisi. Şirketimiz 19 Mayıs Üniversitesi dahil hemen her üniversiteyle farklı e-kaynaklar sağlamaktadır. Ben sözü daha fazla uzatmadan konuğumuz Profesör Simon Maxwell'i tanıtmak istiyorum. Profesör Maxwell, Edinburgh Üniversitesi'nin öğrenci öğrenimi, klinik farmakoloji profesörlüğü ve BPS Assessment'ın da medikal direktörlüğünü üstlenmiştir. Kendisi bugün PSA sisteminin İngiltere uygulamasını anlatacaktır. And without further ado, Professor Simon Maxwell. Yes, Professor, we can see your screen.
Thank you very much to everybody for the invitation to come to your important meeting. I'm very sorry that I can't be there in person, but I'm going to take advantage of the wonders of modern technology to try and make sure that we can nevertheless be together. Thank you very much for listening to me in English. My Turkish is very limited, so it would be a very short talk indeed if I were to try that out. What I'd like to talk about is our implementation of the prescribing skills or safety assessment here in the United Kingdom as a means of trying to improve the training and preparation of future prescribers for using medicines in the healthcare system. I think for all of us in medical education, one of the real challenges is to prepare our graduates from medical schools and from postgraduate training for being able to prescribe medicine safely and effectively. Prescribing medicines is a real challenge. I think most of you in the room will be prescribers yourself, and having reviewed a patient, tried to make a diagnosis, you then have to choose a medicine, dose, route and frequency of administration and the length and duration of administration, taking into account lots of different factors which make every individual patient unique. You have to then be able to counsel that patient about their medicine so that they understand features related to safety, spotting adverse drug reactions, for instance. You then have to know how to monitor the effects and follow up the results of that prescription. Now that's very challenging, and most of what happens here in the UK is probably of a good quality, but we know from a number of studies that around 10% of the prescriptions written in UK hospitals have some kind of error within them, and in primary care in our communities, about 5% of the prescriptions written by our general practitioners have those problems. We also know that many patients who come to hospital and also those who see their doctors in the community are there because of adverse drug reactions which could have been avoided. And on the right hand side of this slide, a recent study carried out in England suggested that there were millions of potentially clinically significant prescribing errors made every year, and that this was going to cost the health service rather a lot of money. Now, I've been concerned about preparation of prescribing for our first year doctors for some time, and there are lots of studies have been carried out, and I'm not going to go into those in detail, but the key messages which came from those studies are that new doctors do most of the prescribing in our hospitals. They feel generally underprepared for that. They don't think they get a lot of training for prescribing in their medical education, and it's the part of the job that they fear the most. And so I thought 20 years ago we needed to start to try and do something about that. And through my membership of the British Pharmacological Society, I was able to work at a national level to embark on a number of projects to try and improve matters. The first thing really was a major meeting which took place involving all of the key stakeholders for medical education here in the UK, and we agreed firstly that there should be a clear curriculum for learning to prescribe in medical schools, that there should be an e-learning strategy nationally to help our medical students to develop those skills. But very importantly, and what I want to talk about most today, is that there should be a reliable assessment put in place that would allow medical students and their medical schools to demonstrate that the students were ready to prescribe at the point of graduation. And that really was the genesis of what was originally called the Prescribing Skills Assessment, and now in the UK we call it the Prescribing Safety Assessment, which is a national graduate competency assessment in safe and effective use of medicines. Why do this on a national level? Well, firstly, we want prescribing assessments because there is a clinical governance and patient safety reason to make sure that our graduates are ready to prescribe. And secondarily, there are good educational reasons why medical schools themselves would want to know whether their courses are providing appropriate preparation in this area. So to have a prescribing assessment that actually measured outcomes of education would be very valuable. When we started this process about 15 years ago, we couldn't find anywhere in the world a national prescribing assessment of this kind. So we really started with a blank sheet of paper and designed our own. And we decided that it was best to do this nationally, because if you want to do something which is really good quality, takes the best of what different medical schools are delivering, then bringing everybody together and creating something nationally seemed the best way and the most efficient way to go. The basic principles we started with when designing this assessment was that it would have to be passed before beginning work in our National Health Service. It would be based on real cases that were relevant to the practice of young doctors in our hospitals. We decided, even though most prescribing was on paper at that time in the UK, we decided that this would be an online assessment as being the only practical way that we could deliver the assessment all around the country in different locations. It's an open book assessment, so our candidates do have access to the same tool that they would have access to when they prescribe. And wherever possible, this was to test decision-making, skills and deductive powers. We didn't want this just to be a simple test of knowledge. We wanted this to be set in a clinical arena with relevant clinical cases. So this was the design of the assessment we put up. There were 8 skills that we thought were important: writing new prescriptions, reviewing prescriptions, planning management for cases presenting to hospital and primary care, providing information to patients, being able to calculate drug doses effectively, spot and treat adverse drug reactions, understanding how to monitor the effects of medicines, both good effects and bad effects, and being able to interpret data and measurements relevant to medicine, relevant to prescribing medicine, so that appropriate decision making could be made. Our assessment is a 2-hour assessment, and our cases are set in medicine, surgery, elderly care, pediatrics, psychiatry, obstetrics and gynecology, and general practice. It's all delivered from a central online assessment tool, and this is where all the authoring from our authors around the country, editing of the questions, quality assurance, item banking, building the assessments, and then delivering them is all done within this online system. We've now, in May 2022, got about 4,000 items which have been written and used in this assessment. And this is just an example of the clinical case authoring template. This is not unique to our system. Many systems work this way, but it's very much structured and written in a very formulaic way to make sure that these clinical cases all appear in the same way for our students. We have around 100 item authors, senior doctors, junior doctors, and pharmacists. They feed their questions into the system, and they then go through a rigorous quality assurance process once they're submitted to the system, so that by the time that they've got all the way to the assessment board and the standard setting groups, a lot of eyes have seen those questions to make sure that there are no errors, that the questions are valid tests of prescribing skills. And the assessment board then works with the standard setting group to build assessments and deliver them to medical schools all around the country. And very importantly, we don't just deliver pass-fail summative assessments, but we also deliver lots of practice assessments so that students in their own time can actually practice prescribing and making decisions about medicines. So what about the delivery of the assessment here in the UK? Well, we deliver this to around 8,000 final year medical students here in the UK in 34 schools, but we also now deliver it to several other countries, particularly Ireland and Malta. Every candidate has 4 practice assessments, so several hours of training beforehand. We then deliver it online all around the country to medical schools, about 200 events. Marking is very rapid because it's an electronic marking system, and it's easy to offer retake assessments if necessary. We also deliver now, by the way, to our foundation schools, so all new doctors coming to begin their training as doctors in the UK from outside the UK have to pass this assessment. And this is what it looks like to the students. This is a prescribing question with a case narrative. They're then asked to write a prescription. They type into the predictive text prescribing tool and begin to write a prescription. And some of the cases have extra material, x-rays or other additional clinical data relevant to the case. They complete their prescription, press submit, and then that prescription is automatically marked against a very complex marking matrix relevant to that particular case. Here is what a prescription review question looks like. So these are cases where something has happened when the patient presents, and there are 2 questions related to the medicines that the patient is already taking to see if our candidates can actually understand how the current medicines might be relevant to the patient's presentation. We have some multiple choice questions of a style that you would recognize, and at the top of the candidate screen they have access to tools such as looking for the abbreviations. They can access the British National Formulary, as I've mentioned. They've got a calculator, and they've got an assessment dashboard, which of course tells them where they are in the assessment at any one time, summarizing their activity. And it's from there that they can summarize. Normally there would be 60 question items there. There's just one in each style in this picture. And then they can exit the assessment when necessary. So just to give you an idea, last year we assessed 7,600 students from across our medical schools, and some overseas medical schools as well. The pass rate was 93%. And for those of you who are interested in the psychometrics, the Cronbach's alpha for the papers that we delivered range between 0.74 and 0.81, which I think reaches international standards of consistency. Now, the most important thing about this process is feedback. Firstly, we feed back to the individual students. So after they've taken both practice and pass-fail assessments, they get a breakdown of their scores in the 8 different sections of the assessment. They can then go back through their practice assessments and they can actually see, they get feedback about why the answer that they gave only scored what it scored, where they went wrong, so that they can improve their prescribing practice, which is one of the most important aspects of this whole process. Here's a feedback on a prescription review item and planning management item. We also feed back to medical schools. A very important part of this is medical schools understanding how their cohort of graduates, how they actually compare with other medical schools around the country. And you can see from the UK experience that 6 years ago, there was a very considerable variation between some of the best performing medical schools students and the not so well performing medical schools. But I'm pleased to say that 5 years later, that variability had reduced significantly as those schools who were able to recognize they perhaps weren't performing as well in this area of practice for their medical students started to put in place changes that mitigated those effects and led to better performance. The students also feed back to us and tell us what they think about various aspects of the assessment so that we can improve it. And one of the most important things they feed back about is how much prescribing practice they're getting in their undergraduate training. And you can see from the early stages, actually, the amount of prescribing practice that was going on in medical schools was not nearly as much as you would wish, because certainly in our hospitals, our graduates on the very first day could easily write 20 or more prescriptions. And if they're only writing a very small number throughout their whole medical school training, that suggests that we're perhaps not doing as much as we could do for them. So what have we achieved over the last 10 years? Well, I think we've built a dedicated prescribing assessment system. We've created 4,000 question items or case-based questions items that test our students out. We've put round about 100,000 registrants through this process over those 10 years. We've run thousands of summative assessments, automatically marked, well over 1 million prescriptions now, I should think. And we've delivered really the first national online assessment in the UK, and there have been more that have followed, but I think it has really been a success in bringing all of our medical schools together. And I think I'm right in saying we were really the first, I think, basic prescribing competency assessment that was nationally delivered in the world. So we've got quite a lot of experience in doing this. What is the future going to hold for us? Well, we've already got lots of interest from other prescribing groups, more senior doctors who are looking for specialist assessments. In the UK, pharmacists, nurses and other groups are able to prescribe, and they're looking for assessments that will let them know whether their graduates are ready to prescribe. And we've got several now collaborations going on around the world, including some Turkish medical schools as well, which I'm really pleased about. And there have obviously been a lot of research opportunities that have come out of this process, because this has really focused interest in doing better in terms of training for clinical pharmacology and prescribing. We've also built an e-learning program that goes alongside the e-assessment, which several of our medical schools are now implementing into their undergraduate training. And this is just standard e-learning of the sort that you would understand, and I'm sure you've already got these kind of projects that allow students to do their learning in their own time, so that perhaps the contact time in medical school lecture theatres can be better used. So in summary, prescribing is a key skill. I think it's a really challenging area for all medical schools. I think the prescribing skills assessment has really focused interest in this area, and rather than just being a pass-fail assessment, I think the most important thing is all the case-based practice that we're able to deliver to medical schools. But this does allow medical schools and their students to be able to see whether they are delivering a basic standard of prescribing competence. We think that the interactive learning tool is particularly important, including some of the e-learning that we've delivered. So I'm very grateful for you listening to me for the last few minutes. Anybody who wants to find out more, I've provided some links, and I'm sure I can supply the slides to any interested parties after this session. So thank you very much, and I'm going to end the presentation there.
Thank you, Professor Maxwell. If there are any questions, eğer sorularınız varsa online katılımcılarımızdan veya salonda bulunan katılımcılarımızdan lütfen sormaktan çekinmeyin. Birkaç dakika bekleyip sorularınız varsa, yoksa oturumu sonlandırabiliriz. Ayrıca belirtmek isterim, Sinem Hocam, Koç Üniversitesi Tıp Fakültesi Farmakoloji bölümünden, kendileri Hakan Hocam'la beraber Türkiye'de PSA sisteminin ilk kullanımını gerçekleştirmişlerdir başarıyla. Sinem Hocam, siz de bugün katılım gösterdiğiniz için teşekkür ederiz.
I've had one question. I should say, Can, my friend and colleague, who I know well, has just written in, and another Turkish colleague has written, how do you overcome intercultural competencies? And I suspect that question means is how do we deal with the fact that maybe in Turkey or Australia you use medicine in a slightly different way. And I think the answer to that is that in our collaborations that we've had in other countries, we are able to supply the basic questions that we have written, but any medical school or indeed association that is interested in using our questions have access to modify the questions, so that if you use a different ACE inhibitor to us, then that can be just substituted into the question. So we do understand well that there are differences in the way medicines are used, but we've been able to overcome that by giving editorial rights to all of our local collaborators.
Thank you, Professor Maxwell, and also Professor Sinem from Koç University. Thanks for your collaboration with them. Okay.
It's also worth saying, Can, isn't it, that we've also been looking to create a Turkish language version. We don't have that yet, but that's something that we are looking to do.
Yes, that's a great note. Thank you. Eğer sorularınız varsa alabiliriz. Özden Hocam, biz sizinle konu hakkında iletişime geçebiliriz sunum sonrasında. Tamam. Professor Maxwell, I think that was it for the questions.
Okay, well, if I
Yeah.
could stay canned to my colleagues in the room, I understand possibly you've also got lunch to go to, but at any stage, Dr. David James at the British Pharmacological Society, you can, or I would be very happy to hear from any of our Turkish colleagues who are interested in this process. Thank you very much.